Welcome to the March 31st, 2025 episode of the Energy Show. I'm energy journalist Markham Hislop, and today's working title is JD Vance Designs on Greenland, a Heads Up for Canada. Today's guest is Geoffrey Johnston, a veteran Canadian journalist who covers international affairs for the Kingston Whig newspaper, Kingston Whig Standard, newspaper. Welcome to the Energy Show, Geoff.
Great to be with you, Markham.
You know, it's unbelievable I got the title of your newspaper wrong. It's been around forever, right? So like it goes back to the 19th century.
Canada's oldest continuously published daily newspaper.
I know, right? And I'm an old newspaper guy. I should know that. Forgive me.
Kingston's first capital, by the way.
Yes, that very true. Look, thank you for doing this. I was watching some TV footage of a press conference that JD Vance gave while he was in Greenland. I guess this weekend, Friday or Saturday.
Mhm.
And your column is titled "Imperialist America Covets Greenland" from March 27th. So anybody who wants to Google that, you'll be able to find it easily on the Kingston Whig Standard news site. What are we to make of this? Give us an overview of your column.
Yes. So, unfortunately, I never thought in my lifetime we would ever see something like this. The United States has gone from being the leader of the free world to being a hostile, predatory nation that threatens allies, traditional friends, and yet sides with Russia, which is waging an imperialist war on Ukraine, a war of aggression, a war of genocide. And just as Donald Trump is talking about annexing Canada, he is talking about annexing Greenland. And on the weekend, Donald Trump was asked by a reporter if he would rule out the use of military force, and Trump refused to rule out the possibility of using military force to annex Greenland. The United States wants Greenland for its critical minerals. Greenland is rich in critical minerals which are necessary for an advanced economy such as the United States. So computers, their nuclear industry, everything depends on critical minerals. Canada also has critical minerals, which is probably why Trump also wants to annex Canada. JD Vance, the vice president last week, announced that he would be joining his wife, Usha, the second lady, on an uninvited visit to Greenland. And basically, this was a show of power by the Americans to show that they could go to Greenland if they wanted to. The caretaker government of Greenland at the time, they have since formed a coalition government, decried the visit, said they were uninvited. They did not want world leaders there during the transition period, and this was nothing but a show of power meant to intimidate them. The Greenland is a semi-autonomous region. It's part of the Danish kingdom, and the Danish Prime Minister Frederiksen, said that this is undue pressure and that Denmark would resist it. So that's where we are right now.
We're going to play a clip from the Vance press conference. So we'll play that just now.
I think a lot of Americans, certainly I, didn't realize it fully until President Trump started talking about the importance of our Arctic mission, about building upon it and ensuring that America can lead in the Arctic for the next generation. And now I want to talk about, of course, the interaction and what Denmark, I think, has done, and sometimes in partnership with us. But let's be honest, what Denmark over the last 20 years has failed to do in some cases, because we know that unfortunately this place, this base, the surrounding area is less secure than it was 30, 40 years ago because some of our allies haven't kept up. As China and Russia have taken greater and greater interest in Greenland, in this base, in the activities of the brave Americans right here, we know that too often our allies in Europe have not kept pace. They haven't kept pace with military spending, and Denmark has not kept pace in devoting the resources necessary to keep this base, to keep our troops, and in my view, to keep the people of Greenland safe from a lot of very aggressive incursions from Russia, from China, and from other nations. Now,
Okay, now wasn't that interesting? So there's Vance giving the rationale for annexing Greenland. And a lot of it is just flat out misinformation, disinformation. I mean, none of this is true. He accuses Denmark of not doing a very good job. He accuses, he says he invents all of these phantom threats from other countries. Presumably, he's referring to Russia. What do you make of that?
It's to put it bluntly, it's horse hockey. Denmark is a member of the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The United States is the once leader of it. Also, Denmark and the United States have a 1951 defense agreement, which allows the United States to have bases in Greenland. The Americans have actually allowed their bases to dwindle from a high of 16 to 1. So if the Americans actually wanted to increase Arctic sovereignty, there's nothing stopping them from making an agreement with Denmark and Greenland to put more bases there. The Danish foreign minister has said that they are willing to talk to the Americans about that, but the way the Americans are speaking to them, the way JD Vance spoke to them, he said that's just not right, and allies don't speak that way to one another.
Yeah, that echoes Prime Minister Mark Carney, who said that he wouldn't even speak to President Donald Trump until Trump was willing to be respectful and take the annexation off the table, the annexation talk, and which kind of backed Trump off, weirdly enough. Trump has this thing where once leaders stand up to him, he's like a bully, then he backs off and he becomes more respectful. And it sounds like maybe that's the strategy that Greenland needs and Denmark need to apply here.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. Prime Minister Mark Carney said in a press conference last week when he was asked about Donald Trump's threat to pour more tariffs on if Canada retaliated, Mark Carney said that he takes note of what the president said, but does not take direction. A very strong, polite Canadian response. And you're right, he stood up to the bully. Likewise, the people of Greenland, the Greenlandic people, and the Danes are standing up to the Americans. And so when word came that JD Vance was going to be there in Greenland, the protests were planned, and the Americans finally decided that we're going to cancel all public-facing events for the fear of these really angry protests by the people of Greenland. So that's the way to do it.
What is confounding here, Geoff, is the fact that if there are critical minerals in Greenland, and the Greenlandians have said, "We'll happily sell them to you," because they're going to have to pay for them. It's not like you can invade the country and then just take them, right? And they've said, if you want more bases, we can look at that. If there needs to be some kind of a strategy to resist incursion, maybe we're talking Russia here. That would be the most obvious one. We could talk about that. We're more than happy to work with you on that. I mean, they've literally taken any rational justification for annexation or invasion off the table.
Yes, but it seems that the American administration is hell-bent on destroying the rules-based international order. And we know that Donald Trump, the American president, much admires strongmen, in particular Vladimir Putin. And it seems that he wants to go back to another time when great powers have spheres of influence and they carve up the world and they take what they want. I saw a disturbing poll, however, on the weekend, and it showed that 26% of Americans agree that annexing Greenland is a good idea. And that's rather shocking that many people would say that. So I would say there is this imperialist colonial sort of strain running through the American body politic right now. And I think that we all have to take it seriously.
There was an Angus Reid poll that came out last week that showed that 14% of Canadians actually like Trump and they agree with Trump. Now, the other part of the poll was 76% of Canadians really, really dislike Trump. And so it's very clear how Canadians feel about that whole approach. There's a Canadian angle to this that came out in your column that I found particularly amusing, and that is we elbows up has become a catchphrase that has united Canada. It comes from Mike Myers, the comedian who was on Saturday Night Live, and he went elbows up, and we all knew what he was talking about. And Charlie Angus, the NDP MP, has been popularized this. But now we've got elbows up Greenland. And it sounds like, Canada has been a little bit of an inspiration for some of the Greenland pushing back.
Absolutely. I think there is a good relationship between Greenland and Canada, especially at the person to person level. And I see on social media, there are many people from Greenland who support Canada and vice versa. And it's interesting that the elbows up has been adopted by them. I'm an old hockey player myself. And yeah, elbows up is a great way to protect ourselves. And I think that Canadians need to understand that Greenland's fight is our fight.
As a former hockey player myself, we take a number, we drop the mitts. None of this will mean anything to Americans and Europeans, but Canadians get it. And I think I've been one of the things that has impressed me is the extent to which Canadians have come together. And I've made this point in other shows. The last time I can remember anything like this was the 1972 Summit Series, where Canada played Russia, the Russian national team, 8 games, 4 in Canada, 4 in the US. That was a great patriotic outpouring. But this, I think, is prepared because the Prime Minister Carney said, just like it was like Friday, this is going to be tough, but we are literally re-engineering our economy. We're changing everything about the way we're going to approach this as a country. And what Vance and Trump are talking about with Greenland, Canada is paying attention because we know we're next on the list.
Absolutely. And I think Canadians understand we are in a dangerous moment. And that's why you're seeing the drop of travel to the United States. CBC ran a story the other day, showed that in February, cross-border car trips to the United States dropped by 500,000. Newsweek reported earlier last week that air travel from Canada to the United States through September the bookings have dropped 70%. Canadians understand that this is a dangerous moment, and you're right, the economy is going to have to be re-engineered. And another poll from Ecos showed that approximately 70% of Canadians think that we should shift our trade to the European Union.
I should point out for anybody who hasn't watched it already, my interview yesterday with Frank Graves, the CEO of Ecos, where we talked for half an hour about the data that Geoff just mentioned. And that is a fascinating insight. Frank's a very well-respected pollster, and his insights into how Canadians feel about the relationship with the Americans it's a real eye-opener. And you know what's funny, Geoff, is that it's changed. It's literally spun on a dime. If you would ask Canadians 3 months ago, well, prior to Trump's election, we talk about, the Americans like family, they're cousins, very many similarities. We brag about this close relationship we have with the Americans, but threaten our existence as a country, threaten our sovereignty, and it's elbows up.
First of all, Frank Graves is an innovative pollster, and I've been following him for a long time, and I greatly value his work. And yes, our relationship with the United States has changed radically, and I don't think any of us could have seen this coming. When I was a young man, I did graduate studies at Queen's University, and my specialty was Canadian American Affairs, and my thesis was on the Canadian-American special relationship, the norms, rules, and conventions. All of them have been shredded in the last 60 days. I didn't think it would be possible to shred such a long-standing relationship, but we have. And I think ordinary Canadians understand that this is a new day. The old way of doing things, they're done. We have to move on.
I want to read a comment that came from your column about it's from the Greenland's outgoing prime minister, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. I'll leave that to you. But here's what he said: "Our country will never be the USA, and we Greenlanders will never be Americans. We are united as a country," and that sounds, I think, as good a description as you'll ever get about where Canada stands right now.
Yes, and I will note they now have a new prime minister. The coalition government has been set, and the new prime minister, Prime Minister Frederickson, said something very similar. He was responding to JD Vance and Donald Trump, and he basically said, "You're never getting Greenland. You're never getting Greenland. We're going to decide our own fate." And I think that's very much a Canadian sentiment. Look, our country, Canada, was founded in part in fear of the United States. After the Civil War in the United States, 1865, the Americans had the largest standing army in the world. The British in British North America knew that they were formidable and that the Canadian provinces had to join together. And hence we developed this east-west axis and the tariff, which protected Canadian the economy so we could build it up. We built the railway, and ultimately we crafted our own culture. Not perfect. We're a work in progress, but I think Canadians can be proud of the land we built. We're different from Americans, and we don't want to be American.
Well, if you're a student of international Canadian-American relations, you'll remember the last time the U.S. invaded in 1866. The Fenians, an Irish nationalist group, in a small group of them invaded across the border and got punted out just as quickly.
Yes, absolutely. And as you can see in the background there, that's a Mortello Tower here in Kingston. We have a series of fortifications that were built in response to the Oregon crisis in 1846. And this has always been, I think, in the back of Canadians' minds. And so any talk of annexation, I think, really flips a switch in our DNA as Canadians, and we really get our backs up. And the best way to bring Canadians together, and you alluded to this earlier, is to threaten us. And we have come together, and we have to stay together because there's going to be economic pain as we make this economic shift and shift our trade to other parts of the world.
You quoted Michael McFaul, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, who is absolutely mystified about what Trump is trying to do here. And so what he said was, Trump and Vance have never explained what U.S. national security would be advanced by invading Greenland, not once. And I think the same thing is true of Canada, but particularly in this context, Greenland. And given that Greenland is happy to be an ally of the U.S. if treated respectfully and will accede to all of their requirements, I guess, around critical minerals and bases, it seems like this is actually counterintuitive, because if you have a native population and you invade them, well, in Afghanistan, it's the lesson of Afghanistan. The Russians learned it, the British learned it, the Americans have learned it. God help us, Canadians have learned it. And a superior invading force can be repelled by a much smaller force that is determined and knows the lay of the land and so on. And it seems like if national security is the issue here, the way to get to increase insecurity is to do what Trump is doing.
Absolutely. The United States is stronger because it has friends and allies in the world. Look, it is the strongest military power in history, and it has an innovative economy, but they're destroying all that by what they're doing, by basically shredding the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, by threatening to invade a fellow member, by threatening to annex Canada. They have turned Europe against them. And it's pretty clear that also that Donald Trump, if push came to shove, would not defend Europe against a Russian invasion. And that's why you see the Europeans quickly trying to ramp up defense production, because they fear that they're going to be in an arms race with Russia, but they're also concerned about a Russian invasion. Look, you're right. If the Americans wanted to make a deal with Greenland and Denmark to develop the critical minerals, I think they would be all for it, because that would mean economic development for that region. But it's also important to note that Greenland is about 88% Inuit, and it has to be done within their traditions and respect for the land.
There is one legitimate concern here, not that Trump is addressing it in any considered way, but that is the threat of Russian incursion. And the Arctic sovereignty has been an issue now for decades, really. And I think it could be argued that we have maybe here in Canada been a little soft, a little tardy coming to the table on this. But nevertheless, if that is a legitimate concern, Russia, especially with global climate change and ice melting in the Arctic and so on, if it opens up shipping passages and we get more Russian incursion into our territory because they're looking for critical minerals and other maybe oil and gas, whatever it is they're looking for, there could be some conflict there. So fine, let's assume for a moment that that's Arctic sovereignty and security is a legitimate issue. This is about the worst way you could go about trying to resolve that issue.
Yeah, there are a lot of layers right there. First of all, it's a rather ironic that the Americans are talking about climate change when the Trump regime or administration denies climate change altogether. It's also important to note that Denmark earlier this year announced a $1 billion investment in Arctic security. Canada is beefing up its northern military. There's going to be a year-round Canadian Armed Forces presence now in the military. We've just purchased this really cutting edge, innovative, over the horizon radar system from Australia to be placed in the Arctic. We got it before the Americans. And the Americans themselves, as I said earlier, allowed their bases in Greenland to dwindle from 16 to 1. So the Americans, if they want to assess blame for poor Arctic sovereignty, they also have to look at themselves.
Well, Geoff, this has been a fascinating discussion. I thank you very much for this. Maybe we'll close out the interview by just asking you, where do you think this is going to go?
Yeah, that's a good question. Donald Trump is the wild card, so I can't say for sure which way it's going to go. He clearly does not understand America's place in the world, and we do know that America going forward will not be trusted ever again, even if they got a really reasonable president down the road. I think the world has seen that they can no longer rely on the United States, and people in Canada and Greenland and Denmark and have to really look out for themselves from now on.
I'm going to close off the interview with this comment. After I get off this interview, I'm going to be interviewed on PBS for the White House Chronicles show. And they want me to talk about this very topic, not just Greenland, but about Canada's response and how we feel. And the startling thing about the conversations I've had with the producers of the show is how unaware Americans are of how we feel about this. They just don't know, and they're kind of shocked that I use the analogy in my conversations with them. Like this is like a spousal betrayal in a marriage where one spouse cheats on the other spouse and trust is shattered and broken, and the marriage is essentially over. That's the metaphor here for the relationship between Canada and the U.S. And they were kind of like, "What?" That they just don't understand. And in fact, Trump's popularity apparently is going up, not down. So I think we've got a bit of a communications challenge ahead of us. We need to communicate to the Americans, American people, just how serious this is and how seriously we take it and the consequences for them. So, Geoff, thank you very much. I have no doubt that we're going to have you back to discuss this again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, Markham.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.